Hello guys, in this video we're going to talk about the DSC type questions about the topic variation. So let's see the first question. The first question is talking about we have a variable C, and this is the cost of holding a summer camp, so that's the cost of something. And we have the C is partly constant and is partly varies as a number of participants n. So in this question we got two variables. The first one is C and the second one is N, and the relationship between them is C is the partly constant, and the partly varies as N. So when you see the keywords partly, which means that C is equal to something plus something. So as the C's first part is the constant, then we can give them a K1, and partly varies as number of N. So which means that they have a directly proportions, and we can write it as K2 times N. So that's the first formula that we have. And after that, the condition that we have, which is the N is equal to 30 and C is equal to 30K. Second condition is 50 together with C is equal to 44,000. Then we can substitute these two variables into our equation just formed here. So now we have to substitute N equal to 30, C equal to 30K into this equation. Then we can have the 30K is equal to K1 plus 30 times K2. As we substitute the N to become 30, then we can have 30 times K2, so we have this one. So this formula gonna be our first one. Then we can do the second one, which is N is equal to 50, C is equal to 44,000. Then we do the similar thing, we can substitute in, then we have K1 plus 50K2. So this is our second formula. So then this is a simultaneous equation in two unknown, so we can using the method of elimination to eliminate this K1 by directly minus these two equations. So by the second equation minus the first equation, and we can have on the left hand side we got this 44,000 minus 30,000, then we have 44,000 minus 30,000, which is equal to K1 minus K1 give you 0, and in this part we have 50K2 minus 30K2, so we just write it down for 50K2 minus 30K2, and we simplify to get 14,000, which is equal to 20K2, which will give you the K2 should be equal to 700. And after that, as we got the value of 700, then we can put it in either the first equation or the second equation. Then we can do it here. Then we substitute the K2 is equal to 700 into our first equation to get the 30,000 is equal to K1 plus 30 times 700. As the K2 gonna be 700, so we substitute in. Then we do this by using the calculator. We can get this 30,000 minus 30 times 700, which is give you 21,000. Then you minus it, then you get the answer should be 9,000. So now we have the value of K2 together with the value of K1. So we can substitute this K1 back to our equation together with this K2 we have. So that we can say the C is actually equal to K1, which is 9,000, plus K2, which is give you 700 N. Right again. So we have this is plus the 700 N. So that's our formula. Link it with the C together with N. So the question A is asking about the cost with the 65 participants, which means that N is equal to 65. What's the value of C? So we can do it here. We can just substitute N is equal to 65. So when N equal to 65, C is going to be equal to 9,000 plus 700 times the value of N, which is 65. Then use your calculator, you can get the value, which is 54,000 with 500. So for part B, it's actually similar because they said the cost is 51,000. So now we have when C is equal to 51,000, then we can find out the value of N. Then we substitute in, we have 51,000 is equal to 9,000 plus 700 times the value of N. That's the value we need to find out. So N is equal to, using 51,000 minus 9,000 give you 42,000, then divided by 700, this one will give you the n is equal to 60. So the answer for question A is 54,500, and for question B, we have the n is equal to 60. So now moving to the second questions. So the second question is saying that the price of a souvenir is X dollars and the profit is P. So now in this one, we have two variables. The first one is the price, which is X, and the profit, we have the P. So it's given that P is a sum of two parts. One part varies directly as X, and the other part varies directly as the square of X. So from this sentence, we can say that the P is the sum of two parts, so we can write as the P is equal to something plus something, isn't it? So the first part is going to be directly as X. So now we have the first part is K1X, and the second part, they said, is varies directly as the square of X. So this is square of X, and make it to be directly, just adding another K2. So that's the relationship between the P, the X. Alright, so the condition that we have now is when X is equal to 30, P is equal to 135,000, and our second condition is here. So now we can substitute. The X is equal to 30 and P is equal to 135,000 into our equation here. Then we can have 135,000 is equal to K1 as the unknown times 30 plus K2 as the unknown times X squared. So you should write 30 squared. So now we can simplify it. Then we can say this is equal to what? We have 135,000 is equal to 30K1 plus 30 squared give you 900. So now we have this is equal to 900K2. So now we can feel that the 30 actually is a common factor of 135,000 together with this 900. So we can using this value divided by 30 and 900 divided by 30 as well to simplify this equation further. Then we can have 4,500 is equal to K1 plus 30K2. So what we have done is just using the whole equation to divide it by 30. So to take out 30 as a common factor, so this is our first equation. Then after that, we can say that to substitute our second condition. So this is our second condition. So now we can substitute the X is equal to 40 together with the P is equal to 160,000. Then we can have 160,000 is equal to 40K1 plus 40 squared, so which is give you 1,600, so 1,600K2. So the whole equation get a common factor of 40, so we can divide by 40. Then we can say this is equal to 4,000 is equal to K1 plus 40K2. So this is our second equation. So now we form two equations. So we form a system of linear equations in two unknown. Then actually want to eliminate one of the variables. We can see that both of there get a K1. Want to eliminate them, so we can using the second equation minus the first equation. Then we can write it here. So go back to this line. Then we can have by the second equation minus the first equation. Then we can have, you can using this 4,000 minus this 4,500. So now we have this is minus 500, which is equal to K1 minus K1 give you 0. 40K2 minus 30K2 will give you 10K2. Then we have this is 10K2, which means that the K2 is going to be using this 500 divided by this 10, but in negative. So now we have this is negative 50. So that's for K2. Then we can substitute. We can substitute this K2 equal to 50 into either equation, maybe into the first equation. Then we can say this 4,500 equal to K1 plus 30 times negative 50. So 30 times 50 give you negative 1,500. Then moving to the left hand side becomes plus. Then this becomes 4,500 plus 1,500, then give you 6,000. Then we can say that our K1 is equal to 6,000. So now we get the value of K1 and K2. Then we can substitute in back to our initial equation to get a relationship between X and P. Then we have the P is equal to, we get the K1 value, which is 6,000, so 6,000x. And we get the value of K2, which is negative 50, so we minus 50x squared. So that's our relationship between the X and P. So the question A is asking about if the price of the souvenir is 16, so which means that the price is P and the price is X, and now we have the X is equal to 16, and what's the profit, so what's the value of P? So which means that we can copy this whole equation here. So we can copy the whole thing, copy to the next equation, to the next page. So that's what we have, and we have for question A, we have the price, which is the X, is equal to 16, isn't it? So the price is equal to 16, then we can substitute in to our formula to get a P is equal to 6,000 times 16 minus 50 times 16 squared. So use your calculator, you can get the value should be equal to 83,000 with 200. So that's for question A. And what is question B? So for question B, they're asking about find the price of the souvenir when the profit is 180,000. So we have this one is the P, this time is equal to 180,000. And what's the value of X? Then we can substitute the whole thing into our equation again. So we have the profit is equal to 180,000. Then we substitute into our relation between the X and P. Then we can say this is equal to 180,000 is equal to 6,000x minus 50x squared. So you can see that we have something squared, we have something, we don't have that thing. So we can move the whole thing into the same side. Then we can have 50x squared minus 6,000x plus 180,000 is equal to 0. Then it's actually, this is a kind of the quadratic equation. So every time you solve the quadratic equation, you can just use our formula 01, right? So you can using the formula 01. So take out your calculator, then press formula 01. They're asking the value for A. So the value of A is gonna be the coefficients in front of the x squared. So we have the A is equal to 50, then B is equal to the coefficient of x, which is negative 6,000. So we press negative 6,000, and C is the constant, which means that they don't have the x there. Then we press in 180,000, and we press the values there. Then you can get the x is equal to, so the x is equal to 60, and press the calculator again, it's still a 60. So this is the double root. This is the double root, or we can call it as the repeated root. So which means that answer only one. There's only one answer, so that we have the x is equal to 60, which means that when the profit is equal to 180,000, then the price should be 60. So that's for question 2. Then now we can move to the next question. We have question 3. So again, question 3 is saying that suppose the monthly salary, which is W, so the first variable, which is W, and we have the W is the sum of two parts. So again, we can write the W is equal to something plus something. Another part, so the one part is the constant, and other part is varies directly as number of n. So now we have the W can be read as K1 plus K2 times n, isn't it? So that's the relationship between the W and between another variable n. Then we have the condition, n is equal to 30, and W is equal to 20,600. And another condition is n is equal to 40, W is equal to 24,800. So again, it's similar as the first two questions. Then we need to substitute this condition into our equation to get the value of k1 and k2. After we find out the value of k1, k2, we got a relationship between w and n so that we can calculate for the rest. So first of all, we need to substitute. The n is equal to 30, w equal to 20,600 into our initial equation. Then we have 20,600 equal to k1 plus 30 times k2. So that's our first equation. Then we substitute the n is equal to 40 together with the w is equal to 24,800. Then we put it in, then we have 24,800 is equal to k1 plus 40 times k2. So that's our second equation. So now we have seen that the k1 are here, so we can just using the second equation to minus the first equation that what we can have. We can using this 24,800 minus this 20,600 to get 4,200. And k1 is being eliminated, so what we rest on the right hand side is 40 k2 minus 30 k2 to give you 10 k2, and divided by 10 on the same side, then we can say that the k2 is equal to 420. So now we can substitute our k2 equal to 420 into the first equation. Then we can have 20,600 is equal to k1 plus 30 times 420. So that's using a calculator, you can using 20,600 minus 30 times 420 to get a k1 is actually equal to 8,000. Now after we get this relationship between the k1 and k2, then we can find out what's our initial relation, but the k1 and k2 can be replaced by k2 equal to 420 and k1 is equal to 8,000. So we have the w is equal to k1, which is 8,000 that we found, and k2 is equal to 420 and times n. So that's the relationship between the w and n. So for question A, they're asking about the monthly salary if that's the salesman has sold for 60 goods. So how many they sells, which means that is number of n. So now we have the n is equal to 60, and what's the value of w? So now we can just substitute n is equal to 60 into our equation here. Then what we can say is the w is equal to 8,000 plus 420 times 60. And use the calculator, you can find out that the answer is equal to 8,000 plus 420 times 60. So the answer is equal to 33,200. So that's for question A. And for question B, it's a little bit tricky, but just still do it. So they say that someone claims that the monthly salary is 30,050, which means that we have the W is equal to 30,050. Do you agree with this? So we try to find out if the W is equal to 30,050, what's the value of n? So we substitute our W is equal to 30,050, which means that we have 30,050 is equal to 8,000 plus 420 n. So basically what we just done is to put this value into our equation, and we want to find out the value of n. So now we're using the calculator, we're using 30,050 minus 8,000, because we don't want this 8,000, so we move to the left hand side. Originally it's plus, move to the left hand side, becomes minus. Then we can divide it by this 420. The value gives you the n is equal to 52.5. This is not an integral. This is not an integral. Not an integer, sorry, not an integer. So n, what's the meaning of n? N is actually the number of goods. So the goods should be in integer. However, what we get here, this is 52.5. This is not an integer, which means that it's impossible for the salesman to get this amount of the salary. So that we have is impossible. Is impossible. So that you don't agree, do not agree. Alright, so let's see for the next questions. So maybe we take the whole thing, the fourth questions, into the next page, because they don't have enough space. Now we have a whole page to do with these questions. So again, we want to find out what's the variable here. So the production cost of something is C, isn't it? And it's given that C is partly constant and partly vary as the square root of V. So V is the volume. So now we have two variables, which is V and C, isn't it? And they say that C is partially something. So we have the C is equal to something plus the something. Then we can write it properly to get a C is equal to, the first part is constant, so we have a K1, then plus the second part is the square root of V, so we have the K2 times the square root of V. So this is our initial equation. This is our initial formula, or the initial equation to link the V together with the C, but there's K1, K2 as the variable that we need to find it out. So now we have the condition, which is the V is equal to 2500, C is equal to 31, and the second condition is V is equal to 3600, C is equal to 36. So again, we substitute in. So we substitute the V value is equal to 2500, C is equal to 31 into our equation. Maybe say this is the star. So that we have the C is equal to 31 is equal to K1 plus K2 times the square root of 2500. And then this is our first equation, but we can do some simplification. Square root of 2500, which will give you 50. So we have the 31 is equal to K1 plus 50 K2. So this is our first equation. Then we substitute again. We're doing the substitution again, substituting the second condition, which is V equal to 3600 plus the V is equal to 3600, C is equal to 36 into our star equation, our initial formula. Then we can have 36 is equal to K1 plus K2 times the square root of 3600. Again, we simplify it. We have 36 is equal to K1 plus the square root of 3600 gives you 60. Then we have 60 K2. So this is our second equation. So you can see that we still got this K1 here. You just minus them, then you can got these K1 be eliminated. So we can buy the formula 2 minus formula 1, then which means that we're using the 36 minus this 31 to get 5. And we have this 60K2 minus the 50K2 will give you 10K2. Then doing the simplification by using this 5 divided by the 10, we divide it, then we have the K2 is equal to a half. So K2 is equal to a half. So after that, we can substitute this K2 is equal to half into the first equation. Then we can have 31 is equal to K1 plus 50 times K2, which is half. Then we can using the calculator to find out the K1 is equal to 31 minus 50 times a half. So the K1 is equal to 6. Then now we have the formula, the value of K2, which is a half, and the value of K1, which is 6. Then which means that in this initial formula, we have already find out the value of K1 together with the K2. Then we can substitute in so that we have the C is equal to K1, which is 6, plus K2, which is a half, and the square root of V. So this is the formula connecting the C together with the V. So we have a relationship between the value of C and V. So now we can do question A. So in question A, they are asking find out the production cost when the volume is equal to 2025. So we have the V is equal to 2025. Then what's the value of C? So C is equal to 6 plus half of square root V. Then we can substitute the value of V is equal to 2025 into our equation here. Then we have the C is equal to 6 plus a half of 2025, but remember to take the square root. Then using your calculator to find it out, we have square root 2025 times a half, then plus the 6. We have the value of C is equal to 28.5. So that's the production cost, which is equal to 28.5. So for question B, we have a container B, which is similar to a container A, described in A. So if the surface area of B is 2.56 times of the container A, so find out the production cost. So be careful in these questions, they are saying that the surface area is 2.56 times. So what's that mean? So we have the surface area of B is equal to 2.56 of the surface area of A. So if you still remember that, if we have, like, for example, if we have a length, which is, this is 1, this is 2, then what's going to happen if the side length is of this squared? They are the same. So if the side length is 1 to 2, then what's going to happen to the area is going to be 1 to 2 squared, isn't it? And what's going to be happened to the cube? So the cube is going to becomes, the volume is going to become 1 to 8, because 2 to the power of 3, isn't it? So we can say that the length of A divided by the length of the B, so the ratio between the length of A and the length of B squared is actually equal to the surface area of A to the surface area of B. And we have a second formula, which is the length of the A to the length of B. The ratio between the length of A to B cubed is actually equal to the volume of A to the volume of B. So remember this, the ratio of the surface area of A to B is actually equal to the square of the ratio of the length of A to B. So if you want to change from a 1D relationship to 2D relationship, you need to square the relationship between them in 1D. And if you want to change it from 1D to a 3D, because volume is a thing so 3D can have, then you need to cube them to change it into the ratio of the volume. So in these questions, we have the surface area of B is equal to 2.56 times the surface of A. So which means that we have the surface area of B over surface area of A is equal to 2.56. Then if we take a square root of them, if we take a square root of the base both sides, then we can say this is equal to 2.56. Using your calculator, this will give you 1.6. So after taking the square root, so this ratio is actually the length of the B divided by the length of A. Then we can substitute back into this formula to get the relationship between the volume of A and volume of B. So that we have the volume of B divided by the volume of A is equal to the length of B divided by the length of A, but taking the whole thing to the power of 3. So this is equal to 1.6 to the power of 3. Then using your calculator, you can get this is equal to 4.096. So which means that the volume of B is equal to 4.096 times VA. So now we have a relationship between the volume of B and the volume of A. So as we have the container A's volume is equal to this amount, then we can substitute into here to get the value of volume B. So that we have the volume B is equal to 4.096 times the volume of A, which is 2025. Then this one gives you 8,294.4. So remember this. Then after that, we need to find out the production cost. So I'll just write it here, okay? So now we have the relationship between the C and V. Okay, using this equation, then we now have the volume of B is equal to 8,000 something. So which means that we can just substitute this value to be the value of V. So we substitute the value of V is equal to 8,294.4 into our equation here. So we have the C is equal to 6 plus a half times the square root 8,294.4. Then using your calculator, and then you divide by 2 plus the 6. So it's around equal to 51.536 dot dot. But what we want is just 3 significant figures. So which means that what we want is just 51.5. So it's a little bit hard questions because if you don't know this relationship between them, then basically you can't do the rest. So please remember again, if you have the length ratio, if you square it, then you got the surface ratio. And if you got the length ratio, you cube it, then you can have the volume ratio. So that's for question 4. So move to the next questions. We have the cost of painting a can of surface area is C. So in this question, we got the variable A together with the variable C. So we have the C is sum of two parts. One part is various as A, and other part is various as the square of A. So again, we have two variables A and C, and the second variable is C, and we have the relationship between C and A can be written as C is equal to something plus something, because this is in two parts. So after that, we can say the one part is various as A, and the other part is various as the square of A. So we can say that the C is equal to K1A plus K2A squared. So that's our first equation to have the initial formula, isn't it? We say that star. So now we have two formula. The two conditions, A is equal to 4, C is equal to 16, together with A is equal to 6, and C is equal to 27. So again, we're doing the same thing again and again. We can substitute the value of A is equal to 4, C is equal to 16 into the star. Then we have the formula. We have the C is equal to 16 equal to 4K1 plus 4 squared K2. So this is 16 K2. And after that, we got the second condition. We have the A is equal to 6 and C is equal to 27. So we have 27 is equal to 6K1 plus 6 squared give you 36K2. So in this formula, it's a little bit tricky because there we got this 4K1, but this is 6K1. Even you use the second formula minus the first one, you still get like 2K1 left. So the K1 is not totally being eliminated. So this is not that we so that's not something that we want. So so now we can do some simplification first. So for example, we can change 4 as the common factor. We can take that out to get 4 is equal to K1 plus 4K2. So this can be our first equation. And the second equation, we can, to make the 6K1 become K1, then the easier way is just to divide by 6, isn't it? So we can using the 27 divided by 6 is equal to K1 plus 6K2. Because 27 is not a multiple of 6, so we just write it in a fraction form. And 6K1 divided by 6 give you a K1, 36K2 divided by 6 give you 6K2. Then this can be our the second formula. Then we can say by using the second formula minus the first formula, then we can have 27 over 6 minus 4. Just use a calculator to finish it. Then we have this is equal to a half. Is equal to K1 minus K1 is being 0. Then we have 2K2 on the right hand side. So which means that the K2 is actually equal to a quarter. So after that, we can find out, we can substitute the value of K2 is equal to a quarter into our first equation. Then we can have the 4 is equal to K1 plus 4 times a quarter as the value of K2 to get the value of K1, which is equal to 4 times a quarter give you 1, and 4 minus the 1 will give you 3 as the value of K1. So now we have the value of K2 is equal to quarter, K1 is equal to 3. Then we can substitute these two values back to our initial formula, so that we have the C is equal to K1 times A. K1 is actually equal to 3, so I have 3A plus K2, which is a quarter times A squared. So that's the relations. That's the relations between the value of C and A. So after that, we can find out the question A. We need to find the cost of the painting a can where the surface is equal to 12. So now we can say that the surface area, which is the A, is equal to 12, and to find out what's the value of C. So for question A, we need to substitute the value of A is equal to 12 into our equation dash. So now we can have the c is actually equal to 3 times 12 plus a quarter times 12 squared. So using a calculator, you can find out the value of c is equal to 3 times 12 plus 12 squared divided by 4 will give you the value is equal to 32. So for question B, again, it's a similar questions as the last one that we have done. You need to understand these two formulas to be used here. So can Q is similar to can P described in A if the volume is 2.744 times of that can P. You need to find out the cost. So now we have the volume is equal to 2.744 times. So the VP, so we have the VQ is equal to 2.744 times VP. If you exchange it, move the VP to the left hand side, we can say this is VQ divided by VP is equal to 2.744. So if you still remember that the volume's relationship, the volume ratio is actually equal to the length ratio cubed, isn't it? So now if you're taking the cubic roots to 1.744, then we can say that the length of Q divided by the length of P is equal to the cubic root of 2.744, which will give you the answer of 1.4. So now this is the value of the length ratio. Then after that, what we want is the area ratio. So the area of Q divided by the area of P basically is equal to the length of Q divided by the length of P squared. So this is equal to 1.4 squared, then we have 1.96. So now we can say that the area of Q is equal to 1.96 times the area of P. So that's the relationship between them. And then what's the area of P? That's what we find before. The can of the surface area is 12. So that we have the volume of AQ is equal to 1.96 times 12. This one will give you 23.52. So now we got the value of AQ. If you want to find out the cost, then just substitute back in our formula dash. So substitute the AQ is equal to 23.52 into our equation dash. Then we can say that the C is equal to 3 times 23.52 plus a quarter times 23.52 squared. Then use your calculator, you can get the whole thing is equal to is equal to the three significant figures, then you can have this equal to $209. It's a little bit hard, but please bear in mind that you understand how to use this formula. Is that okay? So that's for question 5. And now we can move to question 6. So sorry that this part's a little bit here. So question 6 is here. So now we have the fx is the sum of two parts. One part is various as x cubed and one part is various as x. So we have fx. Fx is a two parts. It's equal to something plus something. And the first part that we have is various as x cubed. So we have k1 x cubed. And the second part is various as x. So we have k2x. So now the condition give you the f2 is equal to -6 and f -1 give you is equal to 6. So now we can just substitute because we have the f of 2 is equal to -6. Then we can just substitute the x to becomes 2. Then we can have the k1 times 2 cubed plus k2 times 2 give you -6. And we simplify it to get 8k1 plus 2k2 equal to -6. We further simplify it to get divided by 2. So we have 4k1 plus k2 is equal to -3. So that's our first equation. Then we can have the second condition. We have f of -1 equal to 6. So we have k1 times -1 cubed plus k2 times -1 will give you 6. And we simplify it to get the -k1 minus k2 will give you 6. So that's our second equation. So to eliminate the variable of k2, what we can do is plus these two equations, because k2 plus negative k2 will give you 0 to eliminate the k2. So we can buy the first equation plus the second equation. Then we can have on the left hand side. On the left hand side, we have this 4k1 plus the negative k1, so we have 3k1. And this k2 and the negative k2 are eliminated, so it's equal to the right hand side. We have negative 3 plus the 6 will give you a 3. So we have the k1 is equal to 1. Then we can substitute the value of k1 into our formula 1. Maybe formula 2 is easier. Then we can have the negative k1, which is negative 1, minus k2 is equal to 6. So that's the k2 is equal to, the k2 moved to the right hand side becomes positive k2, and the 6 moved to the negative side. Then we can have the negative 6. So negative 1 minus 6 gives you negative 7. So now we have the value of k1, the value of k1 together with the value of k2. Then we can substitute these two values back into our initial formula, so that we have the f of x is basically equal to k1x cubed. So k1 is 1, so the x cubed minus 7x. So this is our formula of the fx. So we have done the first questions. So for section B, for question B, we have another function gx. So g of x is fx plus 6. So g of x is equal to fx plus 6. But what is fx? Fx is the x cubed minus 7x. So we have x cubed minus 7x plus 6. And for the first part, we need to prove that the x minus 2 is a factor of g of x. So we just recap here. We have gx is equal to x cubed minus 7x plus 6. And you need to prove that the x minus 2 is a factor of g of x. So if you want to prove something is a factor of another function, so if you want to prove, so we want x minus a is a factor of f of x, which means that the f of a will be equal to 0. So this is the something that we need to test. So we need to test, is this true? So test, is it true? So now this time we want to find out whether the x minus 2 is a factor of g of x. So basically we just substitute these two become our x into the g of x. So for part B1, we can say that we can test the g of 2, which is equal to 2 cubed minus 7 times 2 plus 6. Then 2 cubed gives you 8, minus 7 times 2 gives you 14, plus the 6. And it's actually equal to 0, so that we have the g of 2 is equal to 0, so that x minus 2 is a factor of g of x. And now we have x minus 2 is the factor of gx. And for the second part, we need to factorize g of x. So g of x is equal to x cubed minus 7x plus 6, where we have x minus 2 is a factor. So factor means that the whole thing can be read as x minus 2 times another stuffs. So we can using our long division. So we have x cubed plus 0x squared minus 7x plus 6 to divide by x minus 2. So what we need to put is something here. Times the x will give you x cubed. So we have x squared. If you times it, then we can say this is equal to x cubed minus 2x squared. Then we do the minus. X cubed minus x cubed give you 0. 0 minus negative 2x squared will give you 2x squared in positive. Then we take the next digit, we have the negative 7x. And we do similar things. We need to find the numbers or something. Times the x will give you 2x squared. So we have the 2x here. So we're using the 2x times x give you 2x squared. Then 2x times negative 2 will give you negative 4x. And again, we're doing the negative. We have 0 here. And the negative 7x minus the negative 4x. So basically, this 2 negative will becomes a plus. So negative 7 plus 4 will give you negative 3. So we have negative 3x. And then we plus the 6 to get, again, we need to put the negative 3 here to make the negative 3 times x give you the negative 3x. So now we have the negative 3x here, and negative 3 times negative 2 will give you positive 6, and the minus again equal a whole 0. So now we can say that this is our gx divided by x minus 2 will have x squared plus 2x minus 3. X squared plus 2x minus 3. So this is the rough work. Then we need to factorize this x squared plus 2x minus 3 again. Then we have x minus 2 times x plus 3 times x minus 1. Because the negative 3 can be written as the positive 3 together with negative 1. We use our cross method to get this is positive 2x. It's the same. So this is our answer to part B2. Alright.